The words someone speaks to you are never just sounds in the air. They're windows into their character. Sometimes, the biggest warnings in a relationship don't come from what you see, but from what you hear. Because the truth is, cheaters rarely announce themselves with their actions at first. They often reveal themselves through the phrases they use, the excuses they lean on, and the way they twist your concerns into something that makes you doubt yourself. If you've ever been in a situation where something didn't feel right, but you couldn't put your finger on it, chances are the signs were in the language. Today, I want to share with you the words and phrases that, if you hear them from someone, should instantly set off alarm bells. Because while not every red flag means someone's cheating, when certain patterns repeat, they can expose the truth long before you catch them in the act. When someone is being unfaithful, they rarely come out and say it directly. Instead, they rely on excuses and carefully chosen words that mask what's really happening. One of the most common disguises is the language they use to invalidate your feelings. If you've ever raised a concern about where they've been, who they've been with, or why their behavior suddenly changed, and they reply with something like, "You're too insecure," "You're imagining things," or "You're overreacting," that's not reassurance, it's manipulation. Those words are crafted to push the spotlight off of them and onto you, so you start doubting yourself instead of questioning them. This is the classic hallmark of a cheater's defense, make you feel wrong for noticing the truth. Think about it. When someone genuinely has nothing to hide, their instinct is usually to reassure you, not attack you. They'll want to calm your mind because they value your trust and peace of heart. But when someone is guilty, their instinct is to deflect. They don't want to sit in the discomfort of your suspicion because deep down, they know it's valid. So instead, they'll do everything they can to make you question your reality. That's why phrases like, "You're paranoid," or "You're crazy," become so common in relationships where betrayal is happening. It's not that you're crazy, it's that they need you to feel crazy so you stop asking questions that might reveal their secret. The danger here is subtle but powerful. Once you start believing their words, you begin to mistrust your own instincts. Every time you notice something strange, like them being overly protective of their phone, suddenly changing their schedule, or having unexplained gaps of time, instead of trusting your gut, you start doubting yourself. You think, maybe I am being too sensitive, maybe I'm imagining things, and that's exactly where they want you. Second, guessing your own intuition while they carry on with their behavior unchecked. Excuses like these aren't just lies, they're psychological traps designed to keep you silent. A person who truly loves and respects you will not make you feel like your feelings are a burden. They won't shame you for noticing inconsistencies. In fact, they'll appreciate that you care enough to pay attention. But someone who's hiding something can't afford that level of openness, because honesty would expose them. So they hide behind dismissive language, hoping it will be enough to stop you from looking deeper. The irony is, the more they use these phrases, the more they expose themselves, because a secure and loyal partner doesn't need to gaslight you into silence. Let's be honest. Sometimes people do get insecure without cause, but even in those cases, the response of a loyal partner will look very different. A faithful person will say something like, "I understand why you might feel that way, but let me show you why you don't need to worry." They'll offer clarity, reassurance, and proof through their consistent behavior. They won't need to tear you down to prove their innocence. The difference is huge. One uses love to build trust. The other uses manipulation to protect a lie. The more you listen carefully, the clearer these patterns become. A cheater often has a script. They recycle the same lines because it worked the first few times. They know that when they tell you, "You're imagining things," it buys them a few more weeks or months of freedom. They know that when they accuse you of being too jealous, it makes you back off from asking again. Over time, this creates a cycle. They cheat, you sense it, you ask, they deflect, you doubt yourself, and they continue. It's a vicious loop that only breaks when you recognize the power of their words and stop letting them control your reality. What makes this especially tricky is that many people desperately want to believe the excuse. If you love someone, your heart wants their words to be true. You want to believe you're overthinking, because the alternative, that the person you love is betraying you, is painful. Cheaters rely on that hope. They know you'd rather hold on to the illusion than face the heartbreak, so they keep feeding you excuses that soothe you just enough to keep you from digging deeper. It's like giving someone a painkiller instead of treating the actual wound. It numbs you, but the problem is still there, growing worse underneath. This is why awareness is so important. When you start recognizing these phrases as red flags, you take back your power. Instead of internalizing them as truth, you can step back and ask yourself, why would a loyal partner need to say this? Why would someone who values me want me to feel small or crazy for having a concern? The answer is simple. They wouldn't. The moment you see that, the manipulation starts to lose its grip. Excuses reveal more than people realize. They expose fear, guilt, and the need to protect a secret. Every time someone dismisses you, instead of addressing your concern with love and honesty, they're telling you exactly what you need to know. The hard part isn't hearing it. The hard part is believing yourself enough to trust what you hear. So the next time you raise a concern and someone tries to invalidate you with lines like, "You're overreacting," pause. Instead of asking, "Am I overreacting?" ask, "Why are they so invested in shutting me down?" That shift in perspective can change everything. Because at the end of the day, the truth doesn't need to hide behind excuses. The truth stands strong on its own, while lies always need a shield. And the moment you learn to recognize that shield, you start to see the truth more clearly than ever. When someone has nothing to hide, they don't fear questions. They may not love being interrogated, but they'll meet your curiosity with openness because their actions are consistent with their words. But when someone is hiding betrayal, you'll notice a very different pattern. Instead of answering directly, they'll turn the attention back on you. This is where deflection comes into play, the art of avoiding accountability by making you the problem. When you ask, "Why didn't you answer my call last night?" they don't say, "I was with friends, here's what we were doing." Instead, they respond with, "Why are you always checking up on me?" Or, "Why don't you trust me?" Notice the shift. Your concern doesn't get answered. Instead, you're left defending yourself for even asking. Deflection is one of the clearest indicators that someone may be cheating because it's a tactic designed to escape responsibility. By flipping the spotlight back on you, they protect themselves. And the more you try to press for clarity, the more they twist the narrative until you're the one apologizing for simply noticing their inconsistent behavior. The danger here is that over time, you start to feel guilty for asking questions that are not only fair but necessary. You stop speaking up out of fear that it will cause another fight, which leaves them free to continue hiding what they're doing. Think about the psychology of this. If you've ever asked a question that made them uncomfortable, and instead of answering, they snapped back with, "Why are you accusing me?" Or, "You always assume the worst." That's not a defense, it's a dodge. A person who is innocent can easily explain themselves. But a person with something to hide doesn't want the conversation to stay on them, because the closer it stays to the truth, the more vulnerable they are to being exposed. So they shift the energy back to you, creating a smoke screen. The issue becomes your supposed lack of trust, not their questionable behavior. Here's the difference in a healthy relationship. Deflection isn't necessary. If your partner is late, if they miss a call, if they're behaving differently, and you ask them about it, they may not love being questioned, but they'll respond with information. They'll say, "I'm sorry, I was stuck at work," or "I should have told you I was with friends longer than I planned." There's no need to make you feel bad for asking, because there's nothing sinister behind their actions. But when deflection appears again and again, it's a warning sign that your partner's loyalty may not match their words. Deflection also shows up in subtle ways. Sometimes it's not as direct as accusing you of being jealous. Sometimes it's humor that hides discomfort. You ask a serious question, and they make a joke about how you sound like a detective, or they laugh it off with, "What, do you think I'm cheating or something?" They deliver it lightly, but the underlying intention is the same, to make you feel silly for even asking, so you don't push further. It's a disguise, but the effect is no different. You're shut down, they escape, and the truth remains hidden. Another form of deflection is when they drag old issues into the present conversation. You ask about where they were last night, and suddenly they're bringing up an argument you had months ago, or criticizing something you did recently. This tactic works because it stirs up emotions and derails the conversation. You find yourself defending past actions instead of focusing on the present issue. It's a clever way of ensuring the heat never stays on them long enough to reveal what they're hiding. What's important to remember is that deflection is never about you being too needy or suspicious. It's about them being too scared of exposure. They can't give you straightforward answers because the truth would incriminate them. So instead, they choose the easier route, make you feel wrong for even asking. And here's the trap many people fall into. They accept this shift. They think, maybe I am nagging too much, or maybe I should trust them more. And once you buy into that, the cycle strengthens. They realize that every time they deflect, you back down. It becomes their go-to strategy, and you unknowingly train yourself to stay silent just to keep the peace. But peace built on silence isn't real peace. It's suppression. It's the illusion of harmony while underneath, your needs for honesty and clarity are being ignored. If your partner is constantly making you feel like the bad guy for raising valid concerns, that isn't love, that's manipulation. A loving partner may get frustrated sometimes, but they'll never make you feel guilty for simply seeking understanding. What's powerful is that deflection often exposes itself if you pay attention. Notice how the pattern repeats. Notice how your questions rarely get answered directly. Notice how often you leave a conversation feeling confused, guilty, or wrong for even bringing it up. That's not the natural outcome of healthy dialogue. That's the result of being stonewalled and redirected. And once you recognize it for what it is, you can stop internalizing the blame and start seeing the tactic clearly. The truth is, someone who values the relationship and has nothing to hide will meet your questions with patience, even if they're annoyed. They won't weaponize your trust issues against you. They'll understand that in love, curiosity is natural and reassurance is part of building security. Deflection only enters the picture when the truth would be too costly to reveal. So the next time someone turns your concern into an attack on your character, pause. Instead of rushing to defend yourself, notice the shift. Ask yourself, why is this conversation suddenly about me when all I did was ask a simple question? That awareness alone is powerful because it prevents you from taking on guilt that doesn't belong to you. Deflection is a strategy, but once you recognize it, it loses its power. And when you see it clearly, you'll understand that avoiding your questions is not a sign of innocence. It's a sign they're protecting something they don't want you to find. And more often than not, that something is exactly what your intuition has been trying to tell you all along. When we talk about cheating, most people imagine one single act of betrayal, a night with someone else, a secret kiss, a hidden message. But the truth is, cheating doesn't reveal itself in just one moment. It reveals itself in patterns, and those patterns always show up in someone's consistency. When a person is loyal, their actions line up with their words. What they tell you matches what they do. Their story today will be the same story tomorrow because they have nothing to hide. But when someone is being unfaithful, you'll notice cracks. They'll start slipping in their consistency, and those small cracks tell a much bigger story about who they really are. Pay attention to how often their words and actions don't align. Maybe they say they were out with a friend, but later they forget the details of that story, or change little parts when you bring it up again. Maybe they used to call you at night before bed, but now suddenly they're too tired or too busy. Maybe they promised to meet you at a certain time, but they show up late without much explanation. On the surface, none of these things may look like proof of cheating. But when these inconsistencies keep happening, they add up to a pattern. A faithful partner's life has a rhythm. You can trust where they are and who they're with, because it doesn't keep changing. A cheater's life has constant disruptions because they're juggling lies, and lies are hard to maintain. One of the clearest signs of someone's character is how they behave when you're not looking. Think about this. A person who is consistent will be consistent whether you're watching or not. If they're kind, they'll be kind in front of you and behind your back. If they're loyal, they'll act loyal whether you know where they are or not. But when someone is inconsistent, you start to notice a double life. They're one person with you and another person when they think you're not paying attention. That duality is exhausting to maintain, and eventually, the cracks in their mask start to show. You'll often notice inconsistency in their communication. At first, they were quick to respond to your messages, but now hours go by without a reply, and the explanation is always vague. Or maybe they're suddenly protective of their phone, turning it over when you walk into the room, or taking it with them everywhere, even into the bathroom. If you ask about it, they brush it off, but the inconsistency between how open they used to be and how guarded they are now is glaring. These little changes are signals. They show you not just what someone is doing, but how much they're trying to cover up. Consistency also shows up in how they treat you emotionally. A partner who is faithful will show you steady care and effort over time. But when cheating enters the picture, emotional energy often shifts. They may become distant, less affectionate, or irritable over small things. On the flip side, sometimes they swing the other way. They become overly affectionate out of guilt or as a distraction. The inconsistency between their past behavior and their present behavior is the clue. Love that is real stays steady. Love that is hiding something feels like a roller coaster. You never know which version of them you're going to get. Here's the thing, liars have to work twice as hard as truth tellers. They have to remember what they said, to whom they said it, and when they said it. Over time, that gets messy. They might tell you they were at work late, but then casually mention to someone else that they were out with friends. They might forget what excuse they gave you last week, and when you point out the contradiction, they get defensive. That defensiveness is another inconsistency. It's not the reaction of someone with nothing to hide. It's the reaction of someone who feels caught. This is why paying attention to patterns is so important. One late night doesn't mean cheating. One missed call doesn't mean betrayal. But when these things keep stacking up and the explanations never seem to match, you start to see the truth. Consistency is the backbone of trust. When consistency disappears, trust crumbles. And without trust, what you have isn't really a relationship. It's a performance. The beauty of consistency is that it doesn't lie. Someone can say all the right things, but their actions will always reveal what's real. A person who claims they love you but constantly hides, deflects, or changes their story is showing you that their words don't hold weight. On the other hand, a person who may not always say everything perfectly, but whose actions consistently reflect loyalty, is showing you that they can be trusted. You don't need grand speeches to know someone's character. You just need to observe how consistently they show up. What often happens in relationships with cheaters is that the partner being cheated on wants so badly to believe the words, they ignore the inconsistencies. They take comfort in the apologies, the excuses, the reassurances, even though the behavior doesn't match. This is where heartbreak lingers the longest. Not in the betrayal itself, but in the denial we cling to because we don't want to face the truth. But if you give more weight to patterns than to promises, you'll always see reality more clearly. Consistency is not just about catching someone in lies. It's about recognizing what kind of person they are. Character is revealed in repetition. Someone who consistently shows kindness, respect, and effort is showing you they're safe to trust. Someone who consistently lies, avoids, or changes their story is showing you they're unsafe. It's that simple. And while it can be painful to admit that someone's actions don't match their words, it's far more painful to ignore it and live in the cycle of doubt, confusion, and betrayal. So when you feel like something is off, don't just listen to the excuses. Watch the patterns. If the stories keep changing, if the energy keeps shifting, if their behavior is unpredictable and inconsistent, don't ignore that. Those inconsistencies are telling you the truth their words never will. And once you learn to trust the consistency of actions over the comfort of words, you'll never again be fooled by someone who's pretending to be what they're not. There is something inside of you that's more powerful than any excuse, any deflection, and any inconsistency, and that is your intuition. Intuition is that quiet inner voice that whispers when something isn't adding up. It's the feeling in your gut that tells you the story doesn't match the behavior, even if you can't prove it yet. Too often, people silence this inner compass because they're afraid of what it might confirm. They hear the excuses, they notice the deflection, they see the inconsistencies, and yet they override their instincts because the thought of facing the truth feels too painful. But intuition exists for a reason. It's the mind's way of protecting you from what your heart doesn't want to accept. When you hear certain phrases that dismiss your feelings, like "you're imagining things," or "you don't trust me enough," and something inside of you feels unsettled, that's not paranoia. That's your subconscious piecing together little signals you may not even be consciously aware of. Maybe it's the way their tone shifts when you ask a simple question. Maybe it's the way their eyes avoid yours, or how they suddenly guard their phone more tightly. These small details get logged into your awareness, and intuition strings them together into a feeling. That's why you can't always explain why you feel uneasy, but you know you do. The tragedy is that many people ignore that feeling because they don't want to rock the boat. They tell themselves, "I'm probably overthinking," or "I should just trust them more." And so they swallow their intuition, convincing themselves that the love they feel should outweigh the doubt. But the longer you ignore that voice, the louder the betrayal feels when it finally comes to light. The reality is your intuition often knows before you do. It sees the truth your heart tries to avoid. Think about how many times in your life you've said, "I knew something was off," after discovering the truth. That's not hindsight. That's your intuition reminding you that it was speaking to you all along. You just didn't listen. Cheaters rely on that. They bank on you ignoring your instincts because as long as you keep silencing that voice, they can continue their behavior unchecked. They may even use your sensitivity against you, saying things like, "You're always suspicious," to make you feel guilty for having the very instincts that could protect you. But here's the empowering truth. Intuition is rarely wrong when it comes from a place of genuine awareness. Now, it's important to distinguish intuition from insecurity. Insecurity comes from fear. You fear losing someone, so you imagine scenarios that may not be real. Intuition, however, comes from subtle evidence. It's rooted in noticing changes and feeling the disconnect between words and actions. Insecurity is chaotic and noisy. Intuition is calm but persistent. It doesn't scream, it quietly tugs at you again and again until you pay attention. When you allow yourself to trust that inner voice, you reclaim your power. Instead of being swayed by excuses or confused by deflection, you step back and honor the fact that something doesn't feel right. You stop gaslighting yourself into silence, and you start asking the questions that matter. Even if you don't have proof, you respect your feelings enough to treat them as valid. And that alone shifts the dynamic, because the moment you stop ignoring your intuition, you become harder to manipulate. Your intuition is like an internal radar. It doesn't need evidence in black and white to tell you that the energy has changed. It notices the way affection feels different, the way conversations seem shorter, the way explanations sound rehearsed. It alerts you not by showing you the betrayal directly, but by reminding you that trust is being eroded. And that erosion, in itself, is enough reason to take it seriously. You don't need to wait for absolute proof to validate your feelings. The simple fact that you no longer feel secure in the relationship is already telling you something vital. Cheating doesn't only destroy relationships through the act itself, it destroys them through the erosion of trust, safety, and openness. Your intuition is the guardian that alerts you when those things are slipping away. If you ignore it, you stay in the cycle of confusion, second-guessing, and waiting for proof. But if you listen, you can take steps sooner, whether that means asking harder questions, setting boundaries, or even walking away when you know deep down that you deserve better. Trusting your intuition doesn't mean assuming the worst about everyone. It means valuing yourself enough to not dismiss your own feelings. It means acknowledging that if something feels wrong repeatedly, it probably is. And even if it isn't cheating, the simple fact that you're feeling dismissed, neglected, or lied to is reason enough to reevaluate the relationship. Because a healthy partnership doesn't make you constantly question your worth or your sanity. It makes you feel safe. The mistake many people make is thinking that listening to their intuition will guarantee heartbreak, when in reality, ignoring it guarantees heartbreak. Listening to your intuition gives you choices. It gives you the ability to act, to ask, to decide what's best for you. Ignoring it keeps you trapped in someone else's game, waiting for the truth to crash down on you. And by then, you've already invested more time, more love, and more of yourself than you ever needed to. Your intuition is not there to punish you. It's there to protect you. It's the part of you that sees through the polished excuses, the part that notices the cracks in consistency, the part that refuses to be silenced by deflection. And the more you trust it, the stronger it becomes. You don't need to explain it perfectly, you just need to honor it. Because at the end of the day, The cost of ignoring your intuition is far greater than the cost of following it. So when you hear words that dismiss, when you see patterns that don't align, when you feel that gnawing sense that something isn't right, don't push it away. That's your inner compass, trying to guide you out of harm's way. And even if the truth hurts, it will never hurt as much as betraying yourself by ignoring what you already knew deep down.